So this week we are talking about the legal and political environment of global business. So there are different political systems throughout the world, right? We have democracies, Athenian democracies, representative democracies, and totalitarian government. Democracies are very common, right? It's a Greek rule for rule by the person, form of government in which all citizens have the right to vote, right? You vote on who's going to be the leader, and then sometimes you vote on issues, on referenda, and things like that, right? Athenian democracy is a pure form of democracy in which all adults and citizens vote directly on matters affecting the community. So rather than leaving it up to the politician in charge of that community, people actually vote on matters that directly affect them. That's a true form of democracy, right? Representative democracy, it's a form of government in which citizens vote to elect given individuals. So you elect your president, you elect your representatives, you elect your mayors and your city council and who else, a bunch of people, right? And those people are the representatives for a certain period of time. In the president's case, 4 years, right? A totalitarian government is a system of government in which individuals govern without the support or consent of the citizens. For example, a military dictatorship. And, no democracy or no country, well, actually, there are a few countries that fit into one or the other, right? Just like when we talked about socialism and communism, it's a spectrum. And countries fit kind of in between there. Here you have the totalitarian system, and here you have total democracy, and everybody kind of falls in between, right? There are some that fall, especially on the extreme right. On the extreme side of totalitarianism, like North Korea, for example, right? So let's talk about economy, national economic ideologies. As I mentioned, we have communism, socialism, and capitalism. Communism is the government or state that owns and controls all major factors of production and is philosophically an economically classless society. So everybody should be the same, should have the same income, same rights, and so forth, same capabilities, and everything else is owned. Everything is owned by the government. No individually owned businesses. Total communism, right? Any countries that you think operate like that? China, not anymore, actually. They're no longer communist. Ideology was definitely, it was based on communism. And even though they're not officially operating under communism anymore, there's still a lot going on like that, right? Not true communism, essentially, right? What other countries? Yes.
I mean, there's no country today that is a communist society, but the closest would be Cuba. North Korea,
yeah,
their Juche communism,
yeah,
other rump states, if you will.
Yeah, Cuba and North Korea would be, yes. There was a hand raised back here. Diego, you had your hand up?
I was going to say Cuba.
Cuba, okay, yeah. So then we have social, let's actually go to capitalism first. Capitalism is where businesses are privately owned. There's strong individual incentives exist. The harder you work, the more money you're going to have, right? And the government plays very little role in the economy. Government is kind of hands off. We're not going to tell businesses what to do. They can do whatever they want. What countries come to mind?
Yes.
The US, not as extreme. If you had a scale, if you drew a line here, an arrow here, that way and that way, the US would probably be somewhere here. It wouldn't be it's not as extreme. We do have government regulations. Businesses do have to follow rules. There's some, but they're minimal, right? A lot of times they have to follow rules because of consumer rights or to safety and things like that. Yes.
I don't know how accurate this is, but aren't there certain tax haven countries that basically have very little oversight over businesses and basically overseas places where businesses will go to stash money?
Well, they have maybe a little oversight over finances, but they might still have oversight over businesses and how they operate when there's a business in that country. So, we know traditionally, people used to have Swiss bank accounts. But if you go to Switzerland, they have a lot of oversight, a lot of rules, what businesses can and cannot do. But it's the banking system. I think the Bermudas is kind of like a tax haven area, right? And that's more related to financial business, financial transactions and things like that. But if you go and you're selling food products or whatever, you might still have a lot of regulations in that country. Right? Does it answer your question or address your comment? Okay. Yes.
I think Jersey has a huge amount of like accounting firms and things like that.
Who?
Jersey, the little like, I believe it's shared with UK and France.
The Crown Territory in the English Channel.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they have a lot of accounting firms and things like that because they have like specific regulations for like financial stuff that they take care of.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
think it's like less intensely regulated as like in other areas.
So they have less financial regulations and rules, right? Yeah. And the reason why a lot of companies do that or also individuals is to shelter your money from paying high taxes, right? Yes, Ellen?
Certain cities in China are classified as special economic zones where the ownership of private property is fully legal and they have a more capitalistic economy
Yes.
within those small cities.
And usually
Or, well,
they're
not small. They're
and
big
yeah, they're
cities.
in our, if population wise, they're not that small, but and those are usually the wealthier.
I think Shenzhen is one of them, right?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Shanghai.
Shanghai too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's, again, capitalism is hands off. Government doesn't really own any businesses. It's all privately owned, right? And then we have something in the middle. Government plays a strong role in the economy and may own stakes in certain businesses, but not a lot. Maybe, I don't know, percentage wise, 20% or something, maybe even less. When you look at European countries, governments don't own a lot of businesses, but there are a lot of regulations. And when you have socialism, there are a lot more social services in socialism than in capitalism, right? When we look at people in the United States, which is more capitalistic than most European countries, there are not a lot of social services compared to European countries that have social services. They have a social net. Nobody will fall through, right? Very, very safe and well, people still can fall through, but definitely much more social services. So and it's important to know what system or what ideology the country that you're doing business with operates in, because that's going to have a direct effect on how successful you may or may not be. If it's communism, you're going to deal much more with the government, which can be much more rigid. Corruption sometimes, well, that can be even that can be on any side actually, right? But if you're dealing with capitalistic systems, it's kind of more like how things are done in the United States, right? And sometimes that all affects the stability of the country too, right? And the stability of your investment. So economic risk. Economic risks are the risks that economic problems or mismanagement in a given country will have a meaningful negative impact on the conduct of business in that country. What are some of the things that could pose an economic risk? You'd go into another country and based on what type of system they operate in, or even not independent from that, what kind of economic risk could you foresee in certain countries? Diego.
Tradition of embezzlement.
Tradition of embezzlement.
Yeah.
Who has that?
Mexico.
What about the United States?
Oh, yeah, true.
Actually, if you look at it that way, we have had a lot of embezzlement in the United States, and we had lawsuits and we had companies closed because of it. We had people losing all of their money and insider trading, things like that, right? So, but insider trading is a different thing that would be related to your company, right? But embezzlement, yes. Go ahead, Ellen.
War. Very big
War.
risk to business.
Risk of having a war. That's going to be an economic risk, right? Or actually, it's a political risk, but it's going to affect how successful you can be. The currency, we talked about currency fluctuation and the stability of the currency and the stability of the economy. A country with an unstable economy is going to pose a much higher risk because your investment could be basically leveled because of what's happening in the economy in that country. That's going to affect you. Maybe overnight you won't be able to sell your products anymore because of huge inflation or things like that. And the value of or your prices you charge, you can't charge anymore, or the money you will receive is not worth much anymore because the currency went down. Right? So that's all economic risk. They include restriction of transfer or exchange of country's currency or deviation of the currency. I mean, devaluation, I'm sorry. Devaluation. Again, when the currency of the country you're doing business with goes down in value, your profits are directly affected, because if you sell something for 100 in the foreign currency, and maybe 100 was also worth $100, if the currency devalued and is all overnight cut in half, which politically risky countries that happens, and economically risky, all of a sudden that 100 units of that foreign currency is only worth $50, right? We talked about that when we talked about currency exchange. Diego.
Yeah, I would say like not just profit, but also like the purchasing power of the country that you're doing business in and things like that. Like I remember, it was like in the 60s or 70s, the peso just got devalued.
What got devalued? The peso. Oh,
The
yeah.
Mexican peso. Like,
Well, you know, when the economy declines in the country, and you know, as a result, you have devaluation of currency, right, on the world market. The buying power of the local population also decreases because they can buy less now with the money that they have. So that's going to affect your sales directly. Questionable ability to repay loans. Loans may not be able to be repaid because of that, right? Human resources and labor relation problems. You know, we have a lot of different regulations when it comes to labor across the world. Some countries have stricter regulation than the United States. Some countries are less strict. Both of them pose a problem. In my opinion, probably the less strict one poses more of a problem. Look at all the companies that are manufacturing in countries where they have very little labor laws. Look at all the, what's the right word? The damage that they do to people and countries. And then sometimes they get a bad image in the United States because they're doing those things. Other times people don't care, they keep buying their products, right? But anyway, ethically they pose a, you know, both of them pose a problem, yeah. If there's stricter labor relations, you might have to pay them more. You might have to give them more vacation. Likely if you have a European location, 2 weeks vacation isn't gonna cut it by law. Maternity leave, paid maternity leave, required, mandatory. The employer has to pay maternity leave for the mother and the father of the child. For either parent, any parent, right? So you have to know those things. They are all going to affect your bottom line because those are going to, your expenses are going to be affected.
Sounds like California.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you open the business, you are in charge of everything.
Yes.
Related to waste, and it's kind of like, I would say this is a socialism.
In California, more so. We have a lot more. Actually, it's not even required by law. It's what people expect. Well, some of it is, but
People are asking for any kind of these things, like which insurance do you have? What are you gonna?
yes, but it's not, it's, the law doesn't, what I'm saying is it's, the things are, yes, employees are, or potential employees are asking for it and they're choosing jobs based on that. But it's not that the government says, you have to offer them 3 insurances and this is what you have to do. They only say you have to offer them insurance and there's a little bit of regulation, right? But the thing is, because there is a shortage in the labor market, employers have to, they're competing for employees. Right? Even now still. But let's look at the tech industry. Why are they paying so well? Why are they giving bonuses to people? Maybe not so much anymore, but 10 years ago, oh, you know, you got sign-on bonuses of $50,000, you got stock options of 30,000, this and that, right? Great vacation, unlimited vacation, You have that very common, right? Unlimited vacation is very common nowadays, but it's in quotation marks. But that's not because they have to legally, but because of the way the market is, the labor market is, employees can ask for it and employers will pay for it because they want good employees, right? And that's kind of the state in California. We have almost full employment here, right? There's no reason why anybody should be out of a job. Maybe you just don't like the job. That's why you're out of a job. Anybody that can get a job that is not disabled and capable to do anything or whatever, even if you have a disability by law, the employer has to accommodate you, right? We're at a time where there's full employment, right? So the employees are in the driver's seat almost. Yes.
I think I read somewhere that it turns out that unlimited PTO actually saves company money because they are less likely to use it. Because
Yes.
they don't have like a fixed amount of days, so they don't really know how many days to
Yeah.
ask for, and so they're like very skittish about it. And
Yeah, they're shy. You're not just gonna say, I'm gonna take this month off, right?
Yeah.
So my daughter she works for a biotech company or genetics company, but she just got promoted from her position was a regular now to a senior position. Her title is senior, right? And she had I think 3 weeks vacation or something before, and now she has unlimited vacation. So, and she's a salaried employee now. So now she got a raise, but she used to be able to write down all her overtime, which she can't do anymore. And she said, I'm actually kind of gonna make the same amount of money, right? And she said, but I am gonna take a lot of days off, she said, so
Yeah.
I will see about that. But yeah, unlimited vacation can save money. I think they should still have a certain amount of days. The problem with certain amount of days of vacation that employees have, if you have, let's say, 20 days a year, you earn for every day you work, you earn so many hours of vacation or point, whatever. Every month you earn, let's say, 3 days of vacation every month that you work, right? If you quit that job, and you haven't taken your vacation, the employer owes you that. It's something that's a negative on their balance sheet, because they owe that. It's a negative on the balance sheet. If they have unlimited vacation, they don't own anything. Maybe you work there for a year and then they lay you off. They don't have to pay you vacation because you had unlimited. You could have taken it if you wanted to, right? So anyway, back to this here now. So inflation and corruption, right? Inflation affects also the currency, usually affects the buying power of that country, and corruption. Did we talk about corruption already? About when you have to literally bribe foreign officials with money to sign contracts and to do business with, right? The more money you give, the more likely they're going to sign a contract with you. Illegal. And under the Anti-Foreign, what is it called? Foreign Corruption Practices Act, United States, a US corporation would violate that law if they bribed somebody in a foreign country, even if it is legal in that country.
I think we talked about that in business law.
In business law, we talked about that. I don't think we talked about it here yet, right? Yeah.
It's gonna be next,
Oh, it is. Okay, thank you.
next slide. probably.
Next slide. Okay, good. Sometimes I talk ahead of myself. So companies can mitigate risks through careful planning, research and planning. Research the country you choose to do business with and then plan for all these risks, right? Economic risks are not independent of political risks, right? They kind of happen together. So if there's a political event that's happening, that automatically can turn into economic risk, vice versa. Political risk is the risk that political forces or problems in a given country will have negative impact upon business in that country. The biggest one, of course, if a war breaks out, right? But other things, party change that could change regulations and things like that could change. They have lobbies in other countries too. They could lobby against foreign companies or against your industry, whatever it might be, right? Political risk. Most dangerous countries in the world to do business with: Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Haiti, Zimbabwe, Honduras, Nigeria. This book was published in 2017. This might have changed a little bit, right? Yes.
This is 2013 top rate.
Oh, thank you for, yeah, so that's 10 years ago. Maybe, yeah, can somebody look that up, what those countries are today in 2023?
Relevant today.
Probably still, right?
They're mostly
Yeah.
up there still.
Nothing has changed.
Somalia is generally considered a failed state. Afghanistan just had a hostile takeover.
I wonder about Iraq though. Are they still like number 3? They might have gone down. if
No, they're down.
They're down, right? Yeah.
Congo.
World Population
Who?
Review.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Congo,
one of them.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so Iraq's 7, Somalia is now 8, which used to be number 1. Actually, I saw an interesting thing about how Somalian, like you don't hear about Somalian pirates as much now as you did back then.
Yeah,
And then number 1 is Afghanistan. And then
Afghanistan
second is
right
Somalian
now.
pirates.
yeah.
Oh, really?
So they change a little bit over time, right? So corruption, right? So corruption is a situation when businesses are able to illegally alter relevant private or public decision-making by way of bribes, kickbacks, blackmail, extortion, and related activities. So if you do this for me, I'm going to sign a contract with you, or I'm going to do business with you, or I'm going to allow you to partner with this company, whatever it might be, right? A lot of times it's about getting a government contract, you know, a construction company, a company that makes bridges where cars are going to drive on. It's going, you know, let's say you're a company that makes bridges and there's this developing country that needs roads and bridges built. Right? And you're a very successful American company. You go to that country, you offer a very competitive bid. You're gonna have really quality work and everything. And but you know, in that country, the way to get the deal sealed is by bribing the foreign official who is in charge of signing the deal. You might have to give them $500,000 under the table. That's bribery and that's illegal for US companies to do so. What would you do? I mean, you know, there's a lot at stake. It's a $1 billion deal sometimes. You have employees lined up. They're gonna, you know, make a great living and provide for their families. And now if you don't get the deal, you have to lay off everybody. You might even have to close your company because you didn't get that deal you were counting on. What would you do? Ellen?
You could create a shell company that's registered elsewhere, and then you have your shell company act as a bit of a middleman. You can put money into the shell company, and then coincidentally, the shell company gives the money to public officials.
I'm not sure what companies do, but I think it's probably something like that. They do some kind of favors, but it's not directly a direct bribe or something like that.
Call it Indirect.
Indirect, yeah.
Corruption.
Where if you look in the books, it doesn't look like a bribe, right? So unfortunately, that's still happening, and that doesn't make the world a fair playing field, but it is what it is, right? Yeah. Private corruption is business corruption involving other private businesses, right? Individuals or groups. It happens as well. You know, I worked in sales, in tech sales, before I was teaching, right? And we would wine and dine and buy baseball tickets for top games for our most valued customers and things like that, right? In a way, gift giving is bribing too. We're not directly saying, here is a nice gift, now give us your business, but people will then rather give you the business because you take care of them. It's still like that today. Look at the pharmaceutical industries too, how they treat their salespeople, by the way. Anyway, don't get me started on that. Yes.
But in the book, the first example was about protection money, like money.
Oh, protection money.
That's what about private corruption.
That's right, protection money, mafia. Right? You give them protection money. If you don't give it to them, you're gonna be, you know, dead in a day or two.
That is in Chicago, probably.
Yes,
Russia today.
Yeah.
Russia today. Well, Russia 20 years ago.
No. Even today.
Even
But the government.
But the government. is
Yeah.
not there.
yes.
Also in the book, there's a mistake. Like they are talking about the Russian mafia, and that existed in that country until Vladimir Putin became Russian president in 2000s. And they are like mentioning that the things changed, but it's not.
That didn't.
They
It's
just
not
switched
true.
from mafia to the government.
Yes,
The government
so the government became the
became
mafia.
mafia.
So it still exists, yes. Thank you for correcting that. So did you hear that? So the book printed that the mafia existed until 2000 when he was elected?
Yeah.
Until Vladimir Putin became president. And since then, there's no mafia, but that is not true. The government just took over the mafia. The mafia now is the government, so
Yeah, because
it still
before
exists.
2000s, they considered that time like in the United States was a roaring time.
Roaring, yes,
But it's, and
yeah.
everybody understands this.
Yeah, we have insider information here, so thank you for correcting that, yes. Anyway, public corruption is when you do it with government officials, right? Legal environment, let's talk about the legal environment and the legal systems, right? This is also part of your overall paper, right? So, you know, we have different law systems. If you ever take business law, which most of you, all of you business students or accounting students will have to take it, and if you don't have to take it, it's still a good class to take, right? You learn a lot about the legal system in the United States. We have civil law, common law, and theocratic law. Civil law is based on comprehensive listing of legal rules in a set of written codes. So all the laws are written down, and this is it. This is the laws that we're going to follow. Common law, which used to be the case in the US, and US laws are adapted through the common law. They're a combination of civil and common law now, right? But common law started in Old England, right? But anyway, legislative bodies enact less specific rules, but they give judges and courts the authority to interpret the rules based on precedents and other factors. So judges kind of interpret the rules. The rules are a little more vague, and judges interpret them. And they look at what previous judges said in similar cases, and they have to rule the same way. In general, it's still the case, but we also have more rules and regulations now in our legal system, right? So we're kind of more of a combination. Theocratic law is based on religious documents and religious teachings, right? What countries have theocratic laws? Yes,
Iran.
Iran,
Probably all
Afghanistan
Muslim
too,
countries.
right? The
Yeah,
Taliban
Islamic
follows-
Emirate of
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
That's for sure.
Yeah, and the Vatican, Catholicism, right?
Also,
Yeah, Vatican,
wow.
yeah, of course, they have to, right?
Both, yeah.
It's a tiny,
Technically,
yeah,
is it
Brunei.
it's a theocracy, right?
Brunei has religious law, some theocratic law in it.
And if you look at it, every country has certain amount of theocracy built into their laws, I would say. Look at the United States. Where do you see that Christianity still plays a dominant role when it comes to religion, and it plays a role in our government? Although we're supposed to be secular, where do you see that? Yes,
like reproductive education, reproductive rights.
reproductive rights, especially the
LGBTQ rights.
LGBTQ rights, yeah.
As well, I think they literally pray in Congress, don't they?
Hmm?
I think they literally pray.
Do they pray in Congress, really?
The difference there is that they're like private citizens. They can choose to not pray in Congress. There's no mandate that they have to pray. And
So where do
usually-
they pray? At the beginning of the session? or-
Typically, they would pray at the beginning of the session. Courts have ruled that it's constitutional. Your First Amendment right to freedom of religion does not stop when you become a congressman.
So if I go there and while they pray, I do my Muslim prayer, that would be okay?
Yeah.
I don't know,
No,
they
by
would,
law,
they
you
would
definitely-
probably kick me out.
Yeah, they get a little more mad over that one. but-
Yeah, right,
but
right,
legally
exactly.
speaking,
I mean, this is a point, this is a point. We are based, the United States government and legal system is still based on Christianity, right? And the fact that, you know, God, and you have to swear on the Bible in court.
No, yeah.
You have to say
You
don't
under God
anymore?
in the
You've
pledge
never
of
had,
allegiance.
you can
So-
swear on anything you want. You
Where's
can
my
swear on a
book? Oh, I don't have my
constitution.
book. I can swear on my international business book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw the new senator who replaced Dianne Feinstein. She used her personal Bible and swore on that, right?
There's
Yes.
also the pledge. You have to say under
Yes.
God in the pledge of allegiance.
And you have to say that in school.
Yeah, and it's like,
Every
it's-
event starts with
I think
that.
it's kind of ridiculous,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
That's it, because it was added because of like, I guess like McCarthy era,
Yes.
like, and they thought that communists would not say under God. And so they're like, that'll get the communists.
Yeah.
If we put under
It
God.
really worked well, right? Yeah. So that's all, you know, what about atheists that don't believe in that? Why should they have to say that, right? Yes. Alexandra?
I think I saw an article, oh my gosh, there was this woman that got sworn in, I can't remember if it was to NASA or one of the,
Official, like an official was sworn in,
and she swore in on a book about the cosmos. So that was interesting that I saw that her
Yeah.
book of choice is astronomical theory book.
Yeah, yes, astronomy, right, yeah. Yeah, yes, wonderful.
Also like, death penalty, a lot of times, eye for an eye is.
Oh, yes, that
When it
comes
comes
from
to
that,
death
yeah,
penalty.
yeah, exactly.
Hammurabi's.
So anyway, let's go on. So we know the types of laws, there's, this is in the US, the US laws and in a lot of countries, it's the same structure. You have criminal law when you commit crimes against society, against the public, right? Contract law is very important for businesses because business dealings are done through contracts, through agreements, within or outside the United States. And countries have different laws, so you have to know which laws apply in that country and how they are, and what happens if a contract gets breached, and what are the legal recourses you can take if you get if the contract gets breached and things like that. Tax laws are different, right? Antitrust laws, basically laws about competition, about competing, and possibly becoming a monopoly. In some countries, it's less permissible, in other countries it's easier to do that, right? We have a lot of antitrust laws in the United States because we are based more on the capitalistic society, so we don't want monopolies. Product safety laws, consumer protection laws, European countries very high, US pretty high, not as high as EU countries. EU countries have more laws to protect customers from unsafe products, right? Especially when it comes to food products, right? But we're still very high up there. Other countries are not so, right? A dispute settlement law. What if there's a disagreement? Do we go have if I'm doing business in that country and a disagreement happens within that country, you're most likely the only recourse you have is sue them in that country. But what are the laws to solve the dispute when you're in that country? We know how it works in our country, or barely know sometimes, but how does it work in that country? Criminal law, now I have slides on all of these, and establishes which violations of a nation's law are crimes and possibly punishable by incarceration, right? What type of laws are classified crimes, right? Actions that constitute crimes may differ in different countries, right? Here in the US during the Prohibition era in the 20s and 30s, the sale of alcohol was unlawful, but there are no restrictions today. Things also change, right? But in other countries, it can be illegal still. Even within different states, you have different alcohol laws, right? Historically, possession of sale of marijuana were crimes, but today in half of the states, maybe even a little more than half, it's not a crime anymore, but federally it still is. But you got to know when you're going to a country what's a crime and what's not, right? Contract law is the body of law governing the enforceability of agreements, right? That parties engage in. Contracts are essentially meaningless unless they can be enforced in court. You do a contract, you agree on the terms, and if one party doesn't comply with the terms, you have legal recourse. That's why you have a contract. And always have a written contract when it's a big deal like that. You don't always legally have to have a written contract, but it's always good to have a written one, right? For enforceability. Companies and individuals engaging in global business need to be familiar with the contract law in the countries that they operate in, because there are going to be variations. Tax law, we know government always wants their fair share that tax rates, percentages and stuff vary. Sometimes you have additional import taxes that you have to pay, right? If you're bringing money into the country. We talked about tax havens a little while ago. There are countries that have little or no tax currency as a way of avoiding taxes. Tax haven countries include Mauritius, Belize, the Cayman Islands, Antigua, Barbuda, and the Isle of Man. All right. Antitrust laws are designed to promote fair competition, typically prohibit companies from engaging in collusion or price fixing, things like agreeing on a price they're going to charge the same that the competition charges, and anti-monopoly laws, basically preventing companies from merging or becoming too big and too strong. We have antitrust lawsuits, 2 antitrust lawsuits right now in the United States. One is Google, and what's the other one? Another tech company. Amazon, was it Amazon? I think Amazon, yeah, Google and Amazon, both right now have antitrust laws by the US government. The US government is saying you are too strong and too big. You are acting like a monopoly. You have too much influence on the industry. You need to break up and separate certain businesses into different companies, right? We'll see what will happen with that. I don't think they're going to be successful. Monopoly is when there's one single seller of a product or an industry, and there are very high barriers to entry in that industry. It's not like you're selling ice cream at the corner or something like that, where you have lots and lots and lots of little sellers. But this is when you have big industry giants that, that it's hard to enter that industry. Other countries may be less aggressive when it comes to antitrust laws. The United States is very, very strict with antitrust laws. Yes, Diego?
The EU is typically a little bit restrictive than us. right?
Antitrust laws, yes, they are. EU has already passed some laws. I think it affected just recently, social media companies, something about fake news, I think, was it that? Just recently, the EU passed something. If you could look that up and let us know, that would be great. And then we'll talk about product safety laws. Well, let me do that, and then if you could maybe tell us, or did you find it?
Are you referring to when they were warning Elon Musk about Twitter
No,
discrimination?
It's not Elon Musk, no.
Uh,
I'll find it later, otherwise, if you can't, if you can look and find it, let us know. I'm just gonna go on because we're recording this, so. Product safety law establishes the standards product safety, which manufacturers and sellers of products are held to. So your products that you sell have to meet a certain standard. And there are usually safety standards that will prevent consumers from getting hurt, right? Caveat buyer beware places the burden of determining product safety on consumers. You could create warning labels and say, this might be harmful and this and that. And to a certain extent, with certain things, you can do that. But in the States, there are still some laws that you still have to comply with things. You can't sell poisonous food and say, buyer beware, this might be poisonous, obviously, right? So there's a fine line there. Seller beware places manufacturers or sellers the burden of making sure their product are safe, or at least there are enough warnings, right? So more and more, when you have high product safety laws, the burden is really placed on the sellers and manufacturers. Did you find it, Diego?
So they had a code of practice on disinformation that was processed in 2018, but they strengthened it again in 2022.
Distribution of misinformation, there was
Yes.
something in place in the EU countries in 2018, but they now made it even stronger,
Yeah.
even putting more liability on the providers, right?
The recent thing I did say though is because it is optional, X is opting out of it. And the
Oh,
EU
I don't know.
commissioner is like calling them out.
Okay, I haven't read about that one. That's interesting. I should find out. Alexandra?
I have a question.
Yes.
Very briefly, product safety law is, can it relate to agricultural, like the disclaimers that you have on like poultry and eggs and raw meat that, consumption of raw meat could result in getting salmonella?
Yeah,
Like, needing to put that disclosure on.
I
food.
think they do. Do they put it on there?
I think restaurants do it as well.
Oh, if they serve it, if they serve it,
If they serve something,
Yeah.
medium rare or rare, like, just letting you know, consuming any, improperly cooked.
Well, you can't call it improperly cooked,
Well-
because if you serve chicken raw, that's
Yeah.
not just improperly cooked, you
Yeah.
can't eat
Yeah.
chicken raw, period, right? But that could pose a risk. I don't know, I haven't noticed that when I eat sushi, I don't see a warning label that it could be, right? It's not, but some of it is assumption of risk,
Yeah.
I eat sushi regularly. I know if I eat too much of it, or if it wasn't, it's not necessarily the best to do every day, right?
Mm.
But it's assumption of risk. So if you take my business class, we talk a lot about that, right? If you're a business student, you probably take it because I'm one of the few instructors that teaches it here. But when they do put those warning labels on food, yes, usually because they have to. Just like a lot of all the food labels, they're basically regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. If you sell food products, especially if you sell processed food products, you don't have to put calorie content on a pound of apples. You don't have to tell people, this is how much calories it has, this is per servings, this is how much sugar you get now. You don't have to do that. But if it's processed food, you have to. If it's packaged, you have to put the information on the label, right? Does that answer your question? Yes. Thank you. Dispute settlement laws, how are you gonna settle it in court, right? How does a case go through litigation in that country, right? Alternative dispute resolutions involve arbitration, which we do in this country. Often it is already agreed upon in a contract before you even do business with that other party. You say, we're not gonna take each other to court if there's a disagreement. We're going to use a third-party arbitrator that's going to solve it, right? Which is cheaper and quicker. But if you don't have that, then you're gonna go through court, and then you have to know about the local laws, right? Intellectual property is another issue. Intellectual property is when companies have the right, exclusive right to use, make, sell, distribute things, like copyright laws for software code, like intellectual property laws for technology that is used in a device, like your trade name even, right? That's all intellectual property that you have when you have exclusive rights to use it by law, when nobody else can use it. Are other countries going to honor that when you have intellectual property? When you file for a patent in the United States, and the United States grants you the patent, a regular patent, you are only protected in the United States. But there's an agreement, it's called the TRIP agreement. When you file for a patent, if you pay another extra $1,000 or 800, I don't remember the amount, maybe just a few $100 extra, you enter the TRIP agreement as well, which about 170 or 180 countries agreed to honor, right? So you get now intellectual property is covered in most countries around the world, right? But still, you have to know how much do other countries honor that. Maybe on paper they have the laws, but they're not necessarily following them. Is there something like reverse engineering? Will they take your product apart and then make the same in their own way and distribute it? We have that. I mean, you know, all the fake stuff, the fake Gucci purses and what have you. Yeah. They buy a Gucci purse, take it apart, source the same products, use the same stitching and everything, and make one identical and sell it for a fraction of the price, right? That's all theft of intellectual property. That's a problem when that's not only a problem when you just sell in your own country, but not so much when you go global. That becomes a big problem. There are countries that literally have markets that sell these knockoffs. You go in there, if you traveled around the world, you go to a store and you know, they're like, oh, Chanel, Gogeta Bliss, blah, blah, you know, all those brands. And they're like, I mean, they're not cheap. They're still around $500, but you know, a real one would cost 10,000, right? And they're good copies, yeah.
Would it be typical, or would it, is it ever the case where if you're working with like a major distributor in a country, you can make an agreement with them and like, hey, support us in like legal action for any misuse of copyright or like any infringement on our trademark, right?
Well, they will not encourage trade infringement on that intellectual property, but you know, they can't prevent it either.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't really prevent it. If you sell your purses at a distributor in another country, what can they do if somebody buys a purse and copies it, right? So it's hard, but hopefully they will do what they can to prevent that, but most of the time they can't. But anyway, so I explained what intellectual property is, and these are the three that I said. Patents are when you get a patent that has some kind of functionality, some utility. It could be the technology used in an iPhone or something, or it could be a new type of window latch or door latch or something, you know, something practical, right? Patents are usually good for 20 years. Oh, medicine. Pharmaceuticals receive patents. They're good for 20 years, and you have that brand name. After 20 years, it becomes generic and anybody can make it, right? Trademarks your brand name, right? And then copyright anything that's like music, movies, software codes, other things that are the creation of the mind, right? Any questions about, oh, let me just talk about, oh, okay, yeah, so I talked ahead of myself. I already explained what patent, trademark, and copyright is. But any questions about intellectual property? And every country still deals with it differently, and the legal system is different, and the court systems are different. The cost of litigation is different, although probably United States is one of the most expensive countries to litigate in. It's very expensive. Lawsuits are very expensive here. Okay, that was it. Thank you for listening. And let me stop recording.